Welcome to Fuki Cafe. I'm Ivy Cohn, and our show today is focusing on a local group that is doing work with living and dying, Full Circle Living and Dying Collective. My guests will be Catherine Bush, Akhila Murphy, and Kate Sholey. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Well, just to start with a note of levity, I'm going to read a quote from Mark Twain. I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience.
It is a sweet one.
Isn't that a sweet one? So, what brought us together here was a conversation I had with you, Kate, a couple of months ago, where we were both really just expressing how much death had been on our mind. And that's when you mentioned the Full Circle group. And I know that you have attended some of their workshops, but we'll get into that in just a moment or two. First of all, I need to hear from each of you kind of the 1 minute me of who you are outside of the topic of death and dying. So Kate, why don't we start with you?
Well, I've lived here in town since '94, and me and my husband, we own an astrology magazine. It's 24 years old now, and we're local. We have an office in Grass Valley, and at the moment I am the special projects editor. I get all the more unusual articles for publication that wouldn't normally be published.
And then you work with them to polish them up.
Right. Yeah, I work with the writers to get more of what we want.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Akhila?
My name is Akhila. I'm the owner of Dragonfly Yoga Studio in Penn Valley. I'm also volunteer on the board for the Penn Valley Area Chamber of Commerce, and I write the Chamber Chatter. And let's see, I'm also a hospice volunteer. I've been volunteering for hospice since 2009 with direct patient care volunteer. And currently also doing Dying Vigil coordinator for Hospice of the Foothills. And last, I'm co-founder of Full Circle Living and Dying Collective, which is serving here in Nevada County and beyond.
Excellent. Catherine?
And my name is Catherine Bush, and I'm a documentary producer. I have just finished 4 public service announcements for Placer Kids, and that extends into Nevada City as well. And it basically to get people interested in fostering a teenager. That's a tough one, and but I feel really good about those spots.
So Akhila, coming back to the Full Circle Living and Dying Collective, there are 3 other individuals, Amber Hill, Rich Fisher, and Nandi Zabo.
Yes.
How did the 4 of you come together to actually start this?
Nandi, Amber, and I didn't know each other prior to attending a training class. We all 3 attended a training class for home funerals and dying and after-death care. And this training class was held in Sebastopol by Jerry Grace Lyons of Final Passages. We all ended up showing up for this class. People around the country came to attend this class. And here was me from Penn Valley, Amber from Grass Valley, and Nandi from Grass Valley. We didn't know each other, but we all showed up to this class. We were all so completely moved by the training, by the concept of caring for our loved ones in a different way at home after death, that once we were done with the training, the 3 of us said, we have got to bring this back to Nevada County. We need to join up and we need to do this. So we formed our organization. Rich comes into play because he's the significant other for Nandi, and he's been helping us out a whole lot with our getting us underway, get us going.
And the Full Circle has really only been in existence for about a year?
That's correct. That's correct. We're just starting out.
Mm-hmm. So Kate, you attended one of their workshops. Is that how you became
I
aware
went
of
to the
this?
first Death Cafe, which was a completely Death Cafe oriented, which is a process of people joining together over tea and biscuits, cookies, to just talk intimately about death. We had a great turnout. 35 people came. We split up into 5 or 6 groups, and then we just talked to each other. And there were questions that the facilitators prompted us to talk about, and topics, and it was just wonderful. It was instant intimacy.
Wow.
Nice.
And that always feels lovely. And so then I was very interested and awakened to the realities of, oh, what are we doing? I had a bad experience when my parents died. They died within a week of each other.
Oh.
And it was the most horrible experience in my life, both funerals, everything that happened, just horrible. And so I was very moved, and the light bulb went off.
Wow.
Like, oh, this is something I have to be a part of, continuing.
So, Akhila, death cafes are a piece of what you bring to the community, and obviously it benefited Kate hugely to participate. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about the death cafes again, but what are some of the other things that you offer to the community? And just give us a little overview of what Full Circle does.
Right. Well, we're really about educating right now, about telling the community what your options are during the times of death and dying. And so we'll hold talks, just gather people. One of them was a death cafe that we hosted. And another talk we've had is how to fill out advance directives, just letting people know about what an advance directive is, filling it out, just encouraging people to start a conversation with their own family members. This is where it needs to start, talking to our families about what we want, what we expect death to look like. It's a very difficult conversation. So we want to get out in the community and talk more about it so people become more comfortable talking about death. We've been holding our talks, believe it or not, at Chapel of the Angels mortuary in Grass Valley. So the owner, Carrie Murray, has been very open about different methods of handling funerals. And she's open to having us come and talk about a whole different way of holding a funeral at home. But she's happy to let us come.
Wonderful.
So we're trying to create partnerships in the community as well. And so with funeral homes, maybe with the cemeteries, hopefully hospitals, and let them know what we have to offer. We offer, we offer training for families in particular. So educating families on how they can take care of their loved ones after they've passed, and also helping them assist in the disposition of the body. So whether that's cremation or burial, just giving them their options.
Could I ask, how would you get people to come to the Death Cafe or something like that? I mean, do you publish it, or how do you do that?
Well, thank you for asking that. We do have a website, fullcirclelivingdyingcollective.com. We also have a Facebook page, and so that's how we started out, actually, was with the Facebook page, and Amber was really instrumental in getting that started for us. She's kind of our technical person. So we have quite a following on Facebook. We have quite an email list that we have, and so we send out information through email, Facebook, on the website to let people know when we're having our next event. Yeah.
I actually found out about it at the altar show. I saw your installation, this cardboard coffin with signatures and artwork. And
oh my goodness.
Just, it was very eye-catching, and then Rich was there, and I said, "Whoa?" And he explained it to me. He said, "You should come to the Death Cafe." So
that was one of our first community things that we did, because that was back in
that was in the fall.
October?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, there's a great need. not just here in this community, but certainly in the Western world, the civilized Western world. Fuki Cafe normally is talking about some pretty heavy-duty topics: the collapse of industrial civilization, climate chaos, which brings up a lot of grief, which is one of the main threads here that I'd like to explore around how you and your group are dealing with that aspect. And of course, Kate, you have some pieces to bring in on that too. But there is living systems on the planet are in hospice. So becoming more conversant with hospicing skills for each other, for life in general, to dig down in and really know oneself, deal with some of those hard places so that we can be available to those around us in our immediate communities. There's a lot of grief that has not been expressed over many centuries that we're holding, and now we have this other whole layer of grief on top of that. So for me, I see Full Circle as being a tool not just for the personal death process of a family member, but giving that family tools that they can apply as we move forward through these very challenging times that we're in, where we may be called upon to be coaching and hospicing people that we don't know very well. Mm-hmm. So why don't you outline, Akhila, some of the specifics of what a family is facing that they don't have the skills for that you are providing?
Well, I think what most families don't realize today is that you can have a full funeral in your own home. I think families are probably surprised by the whole funeral industry and the process because we really don't talk about it.
Right.
So I was actually surprised to find out that when you bury a family member, there's actually a grave with cement liner all around it and on top. Coffins are usually made of, coffins are usually made of steel and heavy products and metals. People don't even know that you don't have to embalm the body. A lot of people still ask me, well, I thought you had to be embalmed, and that is not the case. So I think there's just a lot of things people don't understand, and then when they're faced with the situation of a loved one passing, you've got to make a lot of decisions right away. And because the process now, conventional funerals happen so quickly, I feel like hasn't been this time to actually grieve. Everything happens so quickly, and before you know it, your loved one is gone and out of sight. You haven't had a moment to really grieve with them. And what we have noticed is if you can have a family member lie in state in your home, in a comfortable, familiar environment for 3 days, this can happen. You can do this. There's no embalming needed. You may need to just keep the room cool. You may need to put a little dry ice to support the body. But your family can come and gather, and they can have ceremony. They can have ritual. They can bring in photographs. They can sing. They can have music. They can tell stories. But the point is they can take their time. And each day, something may come up that they wanted to say, or they wanted to hold the hand. This is processing grief in a really beautiful way that gives you time. And this is what we have heard, is that people afterward will say, I am so happy that I was able to have that time with my family member. It was so sacred. We don't really think about death as being a sacred time because we don't talk about it. We don't see a good side to it. But it can be so sacred when you are the caretaker, when you can do that last ritual washing of your loved one's body, anointing with oils, dressing, flowers all over, and just that beautiful time of sharing. And that's what has moved me, into really presenting this to the community, just knowing your options. It's perfectly okay to do whatever you want.
But having the options.
Having the option, just knowing what's available to you, and trying to get this community on board as well, which I really feel like we're getting there, especially with having the assistance of Chapel of the Angels to assist in ways that possibly a family may have a difficulty in transporting their loved one from a hospital to home. Chapel of the Angels is perfectly willing to do that. Bring them to your home and then let you have your ceremony, have your time.
In addition to that, having this happen at home it really gives the neighbors an opportunity to participate by bringing food and celebrating and community. Yeah, because it's their loss too, the neighbor's loss as well, and it's not in a foreign environment, and there's not visiting hours. It just seems, so natural.
And involving the children. So this is such an educational opportunity for children to learn about respect and ritual, to learn about what dying is, to see their family member passed away, and children are easier with this topic than adults are. They're ready. They're ready to come in.
And I think children are, because their connection to the sacred being of the universe, we can term it that way, is still more intact. Adults have separated from that sacred element. And I think that they resonate with that right away. And I would imagine that the families that you've worked with, you just expressed how appreciative they are, that they got to have that time to be able to see that it is, in fact, as sacred as a birth. It's just at the other end of the life span.
Exactly. The other thing children bring in is this creativity. And so you can decorate your own casket. You can use a cardboard box. You can have a pine casket and have the kids come in and paint it, write poems, handprints.
So there's a great healing in this moving back towards honoring.
The kids are freshest from God too. They're just fresh from God, and
it's easy for them to just dive into the sacredness of it, whereas for adults they're a little bit more hesitant. Frances Weller is a person who's done a lot of grief work, and I'm just going to read this quote because I think that this is a piece that all of us, I know I've used it. When I heard the Dalai Lama say that he meditated an hour a day on his own death, I went, well, if that's good for the Dalai Lama, it's probably good for me too. But Frances Weller put it this way: my daily practice is to wake and bring my awareness to the statement, I am one day closer to my death. How will I live this day? How will I meet with those with whom I come in contact? I don't want to have wasted this day. This practice draws me into a heightened awareness of this moment and how every moment invites me into full presence, which is sacred awareness. So a family in the midst of a member dying is really put into a very rarefied kind of emotional journey, and if we're not prepared for that to some degree, it can be pretty devastating, and that's, I think, where some of Carolyn Baker's work and the personal journey can come into play. Do you touch on that with your people that you interface with, the importance of doing an inner process?
Not so much, because people that we deal with have their own faiths, own traditions, so we don't touch on that. What we encourage is, with home funeral, it does allow you to do your own ritual, your own centering, your own being whatever your tradition is, or create new traditions. That's, yeah.
Well, and I think that's very important, because we don't have in this culture traditions and rituals that are current. I mean, they've sort of been left by the wayside to a large degree. So that's beautiful. How do you do that? The encouraging of creating a tradition.
Just, you know, everyone's individual. We would just, you know, make suggestions about creating an altar during the funeral at home. Asking them, you know, if just leading possibilities, just asking them if they have poetry, music, anything they want to contribute. But we really want to empower the families to think about that themselves, rather than projecting anything.
What they would want to do.
Exactly. Rather than projecting. So it's just a lot of questioning and listening, and feeling for what they want to do. But really, we're not about coming in and taking over. We really want the families to be in there and doing this hands-on work, and we're just kind of back. And if some tensions do happen, perhaps we can smooth that a little bit by offering some suggestions, but really it's about empowering the families to do what they want.
I think about inclusion with something like this, and you know, I just spoke about having the neighbors come. I can't help but think about the animals, that they would have an opportunity to be with the person who was close to them. That they, I mean, you know, you hear stories about an animal, I mean, a dog or something, you know, traveling 100 miles to find the person that they love, and even though they're dead. And it just, I mean, inclusion is, in something like this, is really wholesome, or I don't know what other word to use, but
yeah, I think when you're talking about the animals, what I'm immediately visualizing is the deceased laying in the bed, and the dog just jumps right up on as they're lying in honor, or the cat, or whatever. Whatever is right. And we don't think about that in a conventional funeral. Your pets are nowhere to be found there.
So it's not just the human species.
So much more.
It's so much more.
The other side of that is when my dog, and I hope I can get through this without crying, I had to have him put down, and I brought him home in his little chair or seat, and then the neighbors came over, and you know, we're talking about him, and then he slept with me, so I put him on the bed, and the next day I was going to take him down to friends who have a crematorium. So anyway, he slept with me that night, and then I went to the flower place. Pardon me. I went in and got a rose, and the lady came out to see Poggy, and she didn't charge me for it. I mean, you know, it was just the whole participation, you know. And I took him down to the place, and was able to say goodbye, and it just was really lovely. So anyway,
our family, our friends, our neighbors, and the random people that we don't even know, who just can be right there with us in those moments. Catherine, I'm so glad that the florist was
she was just
beautiful and right there for you.
Yeah.
And it touches something, and it's scary because so often we don't know how to respond. That woman was able to respond in a good way, but that's part of our human heritage, is to be with each other in these times. of grief.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And give a safe space. I'm really big on creating safe space. You've heard me say that before. Creating safe space with each other, because we can't get down into the toenails of a grief process without knowing that there's somebody who cares about us, who's kind of anchoring and holding this physical reality while we go into that deep place that it feels like we might not come back from. And so that's, I think, a big piece of the grief process is creating safe space, which is so much what Full Circle is helping people do.
Right. Yeah, it's about starting that conversation, being able to talk a little more freely about death, about someone's death, and beginning to have more good stories,
Oh, I've got a great one.
Yeah.
I guess I'll share it.
Okay.
My grandmother passed when she was 93. She was quite the woman. And about 2 or 3 years before she actually started her death dance, we would have breakfast together in the mornings, and she'd give me a good thought for the day. She was quite devout. And she said, you know, I need to plan my funeral. And I need to start now. I need to get it, you know, figured. So would you help me, work with me on this? So we spent about 18 months off and on. She contacted the person she wanted to conduct the service and picked the music and made the list of people who needed to be notified. We laid out her little handout. We did all that on my computer. I mean, we just had this wonderful journey together in planning what would happen after she had died. One day, in the process of this, we were talking about it, and she said, I don't know quite how to ask this question, but I'm really worried and concerned. Can you tell me what they wear in heaven? I don't want to be naked. And it took me, you know, I had to be quick. I mean, she was expecting me to have some kind of an answer for her. And I'm thinking, no idea. You know, what can I say that's like, you know? And it came to me. It was just inspiration. I said, well, Ruby, because her name, I don't know what they wear in heaven, but whatever it is, it's the standard issue, and you will get your standard issue. And she was like, oh, the standard heaven issue. Yes, whatever it is, I'll get mine. That's great. And she totally laid her fears on that completely to rest. The other piece of the story is that on January 1st of 1999, she pushed herself back from her breakfast table, looked me right in the eye, and said, well, dear, I'm going to bed now, and I won't be getting up again. And 20 days later, she was gone.
Wow.
She made that decision, and that was that.
What an amazing teacher she was.
Amazing.
To lead the way and tell you what she wanted. The other great thing is she was able to talk about her fears. There's a lot of fear around death, and for her to ask the silly question and receive that answer probably helped her process immensely. You know, I do dying vigil work for Hospice of the Foothills, and we see some struggling at the end there. And, you know, we're often told this is issues that haven't been resolved, questions that haven't been resolved, maybe people they still need to say goodbye to. But every little issue, we don't know how important that issue is, but every issue needs to be addressed like that. What an inspiration. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yes, you're welcome. I actually wrote a short story about that because it was so amazing to me to watch her process and how she'd come back up out of her semi-coma and know she had hundreds of people come to visit her in that 3-week period. And she would like come up out of that coma, look at them, acknowledge them by their first name, take their hand, and over again, give them just the right little phrase.
That's just such a great description of the sacred time. And so when we are there with our loved one who is dying, you always need to be careful what you're saying, conversations going around her. They're still aware on some level. And for her to pop right up and give this inspirational message What an amazing teacher she was, all the way to the end.
Right to the end.
My grandmother's story is a little different. She was in like in the coma state, you know, and the family's around and all that, and that part of the family, my grandmother and my aunts and uncles, they loved to play cards, and so she's in, and everybody's kind of, and the candles lit, and she opened her eyes and sat up, and she said, "Blow the candles out and get out the cards."
Well, this might be a good place to just bring forward something that's current time that you made me aware of just before we started the show.
It was on the news.
It was on the news. Yeah. Just as an example of encouraging a family to find their own rituals, their own sacred sort of way, and everybody's different. So, Catherine?
You may have seen this on the news, and it's been, I think, all over, but this woman loved to party. And she would have people come to the house, and they would party and have, whiskey and smoking and all this kind of stuff. And she said when she died, she wanted to be part of the party. So they dressed her in her best stuff and had her sitting at the table with a drink and a cigarette in her hand, and everybody was partying. And when I saw it, I didn't know she was dead. I mean, I saw the news, then they started telling this story. And yes, she wasn't moving. It was just great.
What's awesome about that is the family honored her wishes.
Yes,
I mean, that's big.
That's right.
For them to do that. I love that.
And they were all smiling. I mean, they were being interviewed, and they were dancing in the background, and whoever was talking was smiling. Usually, it's well, she did this and she did, but everybody was happy.
I'm sure there were great stories told.
I am sure there were.
See, that's so important to get some levity into it. I mean, how many people would hear that story and go, or see something like that and go, oh my God, that's just wrong.
Right.
Why are they doing that? That's sacrilege, a kind of sacrilege. When really that's what all of us need to assuage our fears, that kind of scenario. Not taking it so seriously. It's a part of life, and it is very serious, and it is sacred.
And I think that ties in with part of our conversation, multiple conversations, about the importance of doing our own personal homework, our own inner work. Because if we are stuck, if we have places that we haven't looked at, we can't be as supportive to the people around us to honor whatever their choices may be. Are you up for just bringing a little Carolyn Baker into this dialogue?
Sure. I've been reading one of Carolyn's books. Carolyn Baker is a writer and a coach, and she does workshops about the collapse of the industrial age. Her latest book is called Collapsing Consciously, Transformative Truths for Turbulent Times. The book that I've been reading is Navigating the Coming Chaos, a handbook for inner transition. And it's a toolkit basically for emotional and spiritual preparation for the death of yourself and other loved ones, particularly during a period, upcoming future, where there is probably going to be more chaos. So we're really going to need these inner resources. And the whole book pretty much is devoted to cultivating an inner life, which I think Western people have a very hard time with. They just want to keep going, and not turning within. And she points out rightly, I believe, that the two values that were characteristic of thought systems before the rise of the industrial civilization were an emphasis on connection with the inner world and a greater emphasis on connection with community and the natural world. So they cultivated an inner life alongside vital participation in the community. It was all of one, I don't know even how to say it, one movement of energy. And that was 75 to 100 years ago that was still going on. And since then, we just allow the the caretakers to come in and just do it all for us, and we missed that whole opportunity. And I saw that with my parents, and it really deeply saddened me that someone called the caretaker 2 minutes after my mother died, with my father dying in the same room, you know. And it was a horrifying experience with the caretaker. He was rude. He didn't care about our family. He didn't care that our father was dying at the same time and would probably be gone in a week or two. He didn't want to answer any of our questions. It was one of the most horrible experiences I've ever had in my life.
Oh my God.
And it really, I had a nervous breakdown after all this was over. A mini, but one all the same. And going to the Death Cafe really brought that up for me. Like, we really have to take charge. We have to go back, and we have to cultivate an inner life. And it's not easy, but Carolyn so clearly in the book describes ways to do it. Journaling, dream work, poetry, storytelling, like at your friend's wake, or the woman that you talked about, meditation, and I especially like these, delighting in nature and creating beauty every day. And these are things that I think most of us usually feel too busy to do, or to even consider doing. So I'm very inspired by her book, and I highly recommend checking her out. Carolyn Baker, PhD. She used to be a history and psychology teacher, and she was a psychotherapist. So she's really been around the block around the emotional issues in general.
She has particularly a knack for putting together tools that are easily accessible by people, tools for their own personal toolkit of personal inner work. And she's by no means the only person out there doing this kind of thing. I mean, oh dear, his first name escapes me. Levine, Stephen Levine wrote a book, 1 Year to Live, which basically is very slim volume, but it helps guide you into a journey as if you only had a year to live, and go through a year as if you only had a year to live, and what that does in terms of bringing up the fears that need to be looked at, unfinished business. How are we going to live our lives? How are we going to live each minute of whatever time we have left? And since basically living systems for the planet are in hospice now, how do we really want to be during these last moments that we may have life on the planet at all, not just human life? I mean, we're losing over 200 species per day. We're in the middle of the 6th grade extinction, and that's the topic for another show, but it impacts what we're talking about here, because that undercurrent of something's wrong and there's deep grief that is not brought up to a conscious level is affecting people's behaviors. So, you know, Frances Weller is another resource. Joanna Macy's work is another resource. And probably somewhere in the...
Kate Munger is the woman who founded Threshold Choirs. There's about 100 choirs, mostly in the United States and Australia. And what the choirs do is they sing to the dying, or sing to people who are ill, or sing to people who are going through difficult transitions in their life. And what it is, she started it because of something that had happened to her. She said when she was a Girl Scout, in Girl Scouts at 8 years old or something, you know how you sing around the campfire and all that, and it made an impression on her. And later in life, she was asked to, or volunteered to sit with a friend who was dying, and he was in a coma. And she was really nervous about, what she was going to do, And so she went there, and for 2.5 hours she sang to him the same song, because it was all she knew. And she said when she she first came, he was real agitated, and over that period of time, there was a smile on his face. Now this man was in a coma. There was a smile on his face. He was peaceful, wasn't moving around, and so that made an impression on her, and so she, I think, got a group together, and now there's 100 different choirs, mostly women, usually maybe 3 or 4. They sing, they practice. The one chapter that I read about, they practice 4 times a month. It's all a cappella. Some songs in unison. It's more the feel of it is more like lullaby kind of thing, where you're brought into life with a lullaby, and it would be. I mean, what they do is they sing lullaby kind of way when people are going and leaving. These I just filmed a woman. We did 2 filmings. One, her name is Estelle, and she was kind of bedridden, but she was still active. I mean, give me the ice and that kind of thing. But she then went downhill real fast, and so about 2 or 3 weeks later, we went back, and she died 3 days later. But the singing, I mean, it was just such a beautiful experience for me filming it, and the family was there. They weren't there when they were singing. The family wasn't there. They were out in the other room, and then the family came in and they sang again, and had a chance to hold their hands, and the family was so appreciative of this. And the reason that it was able to be filmed is Estelle was a member of the choir, and so she knew how important it was, even though it was in a way invasion of. But I have a way of doing low-key stuff, and so it was. I mean, it was fine, and between those 2 filming times, I went back by myself and interviewed her, and how she talked about the importance of music, and boy, you could see the second time, and she was, like I said, she was really dying. Just the look on her face, it was like she was being lifted, and anyway, their website it's called thethresholdchoir.org.
Talking with my supervisor at Hospice of the Foothills, and they have been trying to get a threshold choir here a couple of times, but it's a volunteer position. They do need to have a director, and it is a responsibility, but we definitely have a lot of volunteers who would love to be a part of threshold choir. It'd be kind of nice if somebody out there is interested in being a director, being a part of that.
And there's no charge. I mean, the choir never charges any. I mean, they're doing it as a service to the person, to the community, to the family, and to themselves, because they're getting something. I mean, there's some beautiful thing that happens. That's all I can have.
Well, music is a universal language. It crosses barriers. Smiling is a universal language. It crosses barriers. How often do you see music coming into play with the people you've worked with so far with Full Circle?
Well, the interesting thing that we actually experienced is our funeral was a young man who passed, and they chose the funeral at home, and they just played their son's favorite music, and some of his rock and roll, some of this stuff that I didn't even know about, and brought their family to tears, but they wanted to play that music. That's what he was about, brought memories. Other things that happened, there were Native American drums available in the room. So at one time they did rattles and drumming, so some ceremony that way. So you just never know what a family is going to bring forth. But they felt free enough to do whatever moved them. Yeah.
Well, we have, in this particular area, we have such a high population of talented musicians and singers and poets, and you know, it would be an interesting notion to put out a call to the community.
That's a good idea.
That particular part of our community to be available for this kind of work.
Well, didn't you say that there was a harp, that there were...
Yeah, Hospice of the Foothills actually has harp players who will actually come to Dying Vigil with their harp. They've done that if it seems appropriate to do that. They bring the harp into the Compassionate Care Home, which is the hospice care facility, and once a week they're playing the harp. And you know, that music just is an end of times like that, when you're in your last hours. It just creates that whole, it just adds to that sacred atmosphere, and everyone feels it. You know, and that's where community starts coming together, and that's where sensitivities start to come up. So the more and more that we can be involved with different aspects of dying, whether it's singing and music or caring or just sitting, being a presence, sitting for that 2 hours, just being there. You cannot talk with the person who's in that state, but they know you're there.
You know, you hear people say, oh, we're all connected, which we are, but that, I mean, that's another way to connect. I mean, we're talking about all these ways to connect, and you know, we are connected. And, I think it's important to look at that.
Well, we're all going to die, so we're all going to be in that place. And so I have vigiled, obviously, perfect strangers. I'm called to come in. Vigiling is going through the night, staying with a patient through the night when the family is just too exhausted to continue to stay with their dying loved one. So I'll come in the middle of the night. I don't know this woman. I have been trained to sit and be a presence there and sit for a few hours. And I watch every vital movement, her breath, and her just anything that's going on with her physical being. And I'm so focused that I become a part of her. I can feel her deeply. I can tell if she's distressed. I can tell if she's relaxing a little bit. So sometimes just stroking the head and there's a little relaxing that happens. You just start connecting on such a deep level, even with a stranger. You just have this sense that it's such a spiritual, special time, sacred time.
I would imagine that we may have people watching this program who are saying to themselves, I want to be part of that. I want to help. I want to get involved. So whether it's in this community or any community out there, find their local hospice, find out what kind of programs and training may be available. When my dad passed away, I immediately wanted to go be a hospice worker, and they said, oh well, wait 12 months. And there's reasons why you shouldn't just jump into hospice work right after somebody dies. So find your local hospice. See if there's a death cafe in your community. See if there's something like your Full Circle.
People can contact us. We are a collective, so we're looking for support. We're looking for people in all areas that if we get a call from a family that needs something special, we can bring in your specialty. If you love to play flute or want to assist in a sitting vigil, any of that, we're looking for any.
So the vigils, which I think is a very, very important piece, it's so close to the actual transition point. I would imagine that there is some specific training. I mean, being able to just sit and be quiet is, of course, pretty essential. But what does that training include?
Well, I was trained through hospice for Vigil, and Hospice of the Foothills has just an amazing volunteer program. They train you in every aspect, and they continue to train. They can train you to be a spiritual care volunteer, a dying vigil volunteer, bereavement volunteer, respite volunteer, so many aspects. So you get complete training. They just spend a lot of time with great material, telling you how to sit and just be a presence, giving you little ideas of what you can do to create sacred space, even in a care home facility, even in a nursing home facility situation. You can come in and just maybe move a few things around and make pictures, you know, just kind of clear the clutter, change the lighting a little bit. So they talk about how to create more of a sacred space, how to sit, read from passages. We can sometimes find out the dying individual's spirituality or religion, and we can read. We can sing. A lot of us bring different talents in. I tend to carry essential oils with me. Sometimes I'll do a little ritual with that, or just holding the hand.
Reiki.
I do Reiki for my dying patients as well, only with their permission. So it would have to be family permission for that.
So is there anything that we haven't touched on that we really want to, besides just a little bit of talking about the Death Cafe, which is something that works in conjunction with your organization or a hospice facility or whatever, because this is an international.
Exactly.
I think you had some materials on that, Kate, didn't you also?
Well, I don't know a lot about it, but I know that a Frenchman, Bernard Cretaz, started doing some kind of death groups where people got together, I think in 2004. And then John Underwood, someone from the UK, and I think her name is Sue Barsky-Reed, they got together and they started to do them in 2011 in the UK. And they actually put together a guide for hosting your own death cafe, which is available on the internet. There's a great website. And I think the first person who picked up that guide after they put it out was someone in Columbus, Ohio. And I think that was the first.
Wow.
Right, and that was, I don't know, they didn't even put the guide out until 2012, so it was fairly recently. And that's as much as I know about the history, but it seems to be picking up, but you know, like thousands of people are aware of it at this point, from what I read on the website. Not millions.
Yeah, if you go on the website, you can see where they're being hosted all over the country,
Oh,
all
you
over
can?
the world.
And
I
around the world. So one of the statistics that I pulled out, and they're calling Death, this is from their website, Death Cafe is a social franchise. I love that. This means that people who sign up to our guide and principles can use the name Death Cafe, post events to this website, and talk to the press as an affiliate. I don't know if you all went that far.
We contacted him. Amber contacted John Underwood in November when we were considering doing this, and he just listed a few restrictions. He wanted to make sure that you're not there with an agenda to or self-promotion. You just want a conversation, and you have to have something to drink, a beverage, and cake.
So Death Cafes have spread quickly across Europe, North America, and Australia, probably more places by now because I think this was, I printed this out a while back. As of today, which is sometime within the last 6 months probably, we have offered 809 Death Cafes since 2011, September. If 10 people came to each one of those, that would be 8,090 participants. So, you know, that's touching a lot of lives that then in turn go and touch a life and then go and it's about that emotional, internal resiliency and comfort zone with a topic that allows one to then become an agent for creating safe space so that other people can get comfortable with the notion of death. I think this is such an important piece.
Yeah, it really is. And what we experienced after our Death Cafe, the very first one we did, is people started talking about other people that weren't there, talking to other people that weren't there.
Yeah.
So not only the 35 people who were there experienced it, but they talked to the community. And Amber actually happened to run into someone who had heard about Death Cafe and they weren't there, and just happened to run into Amber. So it was getting out in our community. And by the way, we are going to hold our next Death Cafe, which will be July 20th. So you can check our website again, fullcirclelivingdyingcollective.com, to see our events calendar.
One thing we haven't talked about, but I think is really essential, is a sense of humor.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that's as I don't know what. Well, it was one thing that happened with my own mother, which I'll share with you. She was dying. We were all there, and it was maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, and she finally passed. And so we called the funeral director, and the gentleman came, and he happened to be live up the street, and his daughter and my sister, my youngest sister, went to school together, so he knew Barb, my sister. And my last name, or family name, is Bush. Well, my mother remarried, and her name was Jeffries. So when the gentleman came, and he was waiting, you know, we were talking a little bit. My mother's there in the chair, and he was waiting for another person to come. And he said to my sister Barb, "By the way, how's your mother?" She was dead right beside him. So I mean, we all busted out laughing because, and you know, and I'm sure she was laughing too, you know. But by the way, how's your mother? That was, anyway.
Yeah, you make a good point about sense of humor, and it breaks the tension.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, you can bring in a sense of humor when you are planning your own home funeral, when you are making your own arrangements. You can specify everything you want. You can make it light, knowing that it's your family members that are going to be doing this.
Right, right.
So you can add that sense of humor in there, and then when the time comes and they're taking care of you, those little laughs can come up for them too.
Sure.
Okay. So one of the things that the Full Circle group is very involved in is the green burial aspect, and finding a cemetery that can go for that.
Right, yeah. So being involved means that our intention is that we do want to pursue it in our county.
Now, what is this? It's called green?
It's called green burial, and the definition of green burial is to allow the body to be buried in such a way that it decomposes naturally back into the earth. So no cement liners, no embalming, biodegradable casket or shroud, in a location where the maintenance is very minimal, so you're not bringing in grass cutting equipment that uses energies and fuels. You're not using pesticides. So it's really thinking about the environment, really giving back to the environment. No big headstones, maybe a rock, you know, that's engraved. So, and it's a slow process that this might be happening. What we're seeing is maybe something of a hybrid. So there might be a funeral or a cemetery in the Sacramento area that may offer a section of their cemetery that they may allow you to be buried in the soil, biodegradable casket, but they may want to put a cement vault on top just so that they can have a nice grassy area on top. So they're not 100% green, so there's different levels that can be green. And so what we have been looking at in our county is for something that can be along those lines. And I actually got a phone call from Matt Malugin from the Nevada Cemetery District. So Nevada Cemetery District is for Nevada County, but it's just called Nevada Cemetery District.
I think that they have like 5 or 6, maybe 7 cemeteries.
28 cemeteries.
Wow. 28 in Nevada County?
In Nevada County that they watch over. Some of them are historic. But what he was calling me for is to find out about green burial. And he's on the staff of the cemetery.
Oh, wow.
And he has a cemetery in the area. It's called Elster Cemetery, kind of a newer acquired cemetery, memorial cemetery. And there's a portion of it that's unused right now. And so he wanted to know more information about this. And So I talked to him in great detail. He said that he's going to bring this up to his board, up to the board, cemetery board, and anybody can go to the board and get on the agenda for that. He said that he just needs more people to voice an interest for this to be something, you know, profitable, something that they can do. So he's had a few community members who have written letters. I asked him, I said, I can write you many letters. He's going to let me know when he needs letters. But for any of your viewers out there in this community who are interested in learning more about green burial, I could say, you know, contact me through my website, and we can get together, we can create some letters, we can go to board meetings and see what we can do to make this happen. If they're coming forward to offer this to us,
that's beautiful.
I want to jump on
That's
this and
beautiful.
let's
So
go.
existing cemeteries
Existing
to create
cemeteries.
an area that would accommodate green burial. The notion of someone in this county anyone who owns parcels of property that might consider actually donating a parcel for the purposes of having a green burial exclusive, only green burial cemetery.
Nature conservancies. So that's what I would like to target, is like the land trusts that are buying acres of land to preserve. All you need is a few acres on the side there that we could use as a green burial cemetery. There, people are paying to, for this, so that's helping to maintain the land,
Right.
and we're keeping it pristine. We're
Yes.
keeping the trees growing.
Beautiful.
But if it isn't a part of a cemetery that's already established, is it legal, or is there a lot of bureaucratic
They'll have to
issues?
they'll have to get the zoning. All of that will need to be taken care of. But it's happening in other states. So
I would imagine that the statistics on this are changing very quickly.
yeah.
Yes. Well, each of you has brought an amazing piece to this conversation. Thank you. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
And Kate, I'm
Yeah,
glad
thanks
that
for having me.
you and I had that conversation that day, because both of us were like, yeah, we got to do this.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
just really enjoyed being here, and I really want to get the word out. So I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for being so
again.
willing to come and
Thank you.
speak so eloquently, actually, about
thank
the
you.
whole process.
My pleasure. I love to come back.
Well, I would imagine that there may be a second round. We've managed to have some laughs and smiles and share some really good stories and some really good information that I know you out there watching can now use this as a springboard to go do a little research, find an organization in your area, see if there's somebody doing a death cafe in your area, find some books to perhaps help build a personal practice of becoming comfortable inside your own skin with the whole notion of death and dying. We were born, we die. Thank you for joining us on this Fuki Cafe. I'm Ivy Cohn. Until next time.
All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, into the light of the dark night. Birds singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to see.